Hey everyone, it's David Drever here,
Hi, I'm Joanne Klein.
and we're coming to you from the Microsoft 365 Community Conference. We actually get to do this together in person for a change.
Yeah, that's awesome. So what do you want to talk about today?
So, I'm thinking it might not be a bad idea because a lot of new users who are coming up to records management are like, how do I get rid of the content when it's done?
Right.
So why don't we talk about disposition reviews?
Sounds good to me.
All right, so I happen to have a little bit of an infographic. We can talk about that. Funny how that happens. So, why don't you kick us off there?
Okay, there are options, and
are.
these are options that are built into a retention label
Mhm.
as opposed to a retention policy. First option, I want to talk about this a little bit because somebody just asked me the other day, what is the business use case for do nothing?
Mhm.
And to be honest, I don't have a good one that I've heard from customers.
What I've heard or what I've seen is what in some cases is that I see it in some cases for government use. So
Okay.
they have FOIPA requests, freedom of information, but it has to be maintained for a certain amount of time. It has to be there, but they may not necessarily care if it gets deleted after the fact. It could be still usable. They may need to be
Right.
judged by
Okay.
themselves. So I take the do nothing as it's going to retain that content
Yeah.
for as long as you actually need to have that content in your control. After that, they can delete at their leisure.
Right.
And that's kind of where I
Okay.
see that usage.
Awesome. I just want to back up a bit. Records managers use the term disposition as the action that happens after the retention period. It may be deletion, but it can be other things as well. So that's a term that may not be familiar to some people in IT, but that is
Yeah.
a common term.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. So yeah, and then one thing here is that like we said, like Joanne said, it just makes sure the content is there when you go.
Yeah, makes sense.
The next one is that it's kind of like the opposite of it. It's going to maintain that content, but at the end of that retention label, it's just going to get a retention period. It's going to get rid of that content at that time. You're not going to have no reviews, nothing. So think about it. If you have a retention label or retention policy, keeping it for 3 years. At the end of that 3 years, it's going into this disposition of destruction. It's going to be gone. And there's lots of use cases for that. People don't want to be bothered with the disposition reviews and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, I think this is one of the decisions that you need to make when you're mapping your retention schedule into the Purview file plan on which of your retention labels can you just automatically delete. I think where possible, I think it is good to do this because it doesn't impact the disposition reviewers to review all of that digital content. One thing I want to say about this, any content that's deleted automatically does go through the recycle bin process in SharePoint and OneDrive, just like it would if you were to manually delete it.
Do you want to tell us about disposition reviews?
Sure. That's the option where once an item reaches the end of its retention period, it must go through a review process before it can be deleted. Now, there's a lot of options in here, and records managers, this is a very common request and requirement that regulators have on some of the usually higher valued business records. But what do you see for disposition review? What are the pros and cons there?
So a couple of things. A couple of cons is that it's only available in the retention label, which I kind of see as a benefit because retention labels are very granular. What I do see is a horrible, I'm going to say horrible, but a hard thing for many organizations to swallow. A hard pill, that's what I was looking for. A hard pill for many organizations to swallow is it's an E5 only feature. Which if you have E3s, you cannot do a disposition review. So if you're here and you're like, I want to do a disposition review, you need an E5 or the E5 add-on to your compliance environment. The problem here, and I want to hear your thoughts on this, Joanne, is that greenfield, people who are just starting out and they're just starting in the retention, like we're going to have thousands of files we have to dispose of. What do we do? I have my thoughts, but I want to hear what your thoughts are.
Well, first and foremost, I think you need to acknowledge that whoever you're assigning as a disposition review, and there can be multiple stages on this, it's going to be impacting them a lot. This is additional time that they're going to have to spend reviewing content, potentially a lot of content. They may not be comfortable hitting that delete button. I mean, this is uncomfortable territory for many business people doing disposition reviews.
You're
if
on
it
the
has to
hook.
go through the business, you are on the hook. You're the one that has made the decision.
Yeah.
What are you thinking?
So one of the things I'm thinking as well is that, especially with Greenfield, one of the new features that I'm on the fence. I see the great benefit to it, but I also see it be very dangerous. When you set up a retention disposition review with your retention label, you have a little toggle there. It says if in a certain amount of days, automatically move on to the next stage. If that next stage happens to be disposition, it will actually dispose of that content for you. So what that means is that you're getting inundated with thousands of dispositions because you just turned this functionality on. For a short time, you could say, give me 45 days to go through all of these dispositions or something, pick a number, something along that line. And that gives your team time to get caught up. And if they just can't get caught up because there's just too much data there, you have to decide if you want to accept the risk and then let the system actually dispose of that content for you. I like it for that reason, as long as your organization is ready to take on that risk. However, I do suggest that once you get past that huge hump at the very beginning of things, turn that toggle off, because you have that disposition turned on for a reason. You want that to be there.
Right.
Unless you have your organization is to a point where, if you don't take the time to put your hand up and say, we need this content, it's gone. It's on your fault at that point. So that's kind of where I kind of see where that goes.
I think that's a good idea. It becomes not only a technical implementation of this requirement, but end user training requirement. Document that in your policy that you have that automatic approval. Just so you've got your ducks in a row when something does get deleted, and you can kind of follow that path back on the steps that was taken for that. All of these things are audited in the unified audit log as well. But if you have it configured to automatically approve, then it will in fact automatically delete it for you at the end. So you just have to be prepared for that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that kind of brings us to the next one. And this one here is almost brand spanking new. You may not even heard about this capability, but you can actually do a disposition with Power Automate. And what's really nice about that is that all you're doing is that it's instead of kicking off a disposition review, it's just sending a signal to Power Automate to say, this file's ready for disposition. At that point, you can do whatever you want to do with that document. You can go through all these custom processes for approvals. You can determine who the approval is based on the site it's in. You can do cross-reference lists to get your approvers. You can do, if you want to have your site owners are the ones who are responsible for the content, you can actually create a disposition review based on the site owner without having to have all of these reviewers in a group somewhere. You can actually do that all dynamically. And that's done through Power Automate. A couple of things that you do need to be aware of is that your Power Automate flow is going to take on the auditing component of that. Purview does not do the auditing at that point because you're controlling that process. So you want to make sure that you have that audit, that you want to indicate who approved it, and you make that your own. You create your own certificate of destruction at that point.
Yeah, which is often a common requirement as well, to have a full certificate of destruction that Purview natively probably doesn't provide you enough information. Yeah.
So I think there's one more. We have one honorable mention we have here is that, and it's not really so much a disposition finalization, but it's more of a next stage when you are doing at that point in your retention life cycle. Is it called a daisy chain? I know you just did a post on this. Maybe I'll let you lead off with this one.
I did. It's an interesting way of piecing together different requirements depending on the life of the record. So I'm thinking what my blog post was about that used a daisy chain label was at the end of the retention period, automatically apply a send to archive retention label, and then have some process that goes and picks up all of those send to archive files and store them somewhere in an archive site. You do whatever you want. At that moment, it's custom script or code that you've written to satisfy whatever your requirements are. So in that case, the daisy chained labels were used to send files that were at the end of their retention period to a read-only archive, which is a common requirement that I hear.
Yeah. And that's the biggest thing is that, is that you have that capability. So even though it doesn't actually dispose of the content, eventually you're going to get to some form of disposition. But it is, reason comes in here because it's one of the actions you have available to you after the content has reached its retention period. So.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm going to put in our comments there, I'll put the link to Joanne's post about daisy chaining in there. I'll also put in the post. I did a recent post on dispositions as well. More information in there. I'll throw that all in the comments, and we hope to see you in our next episode. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.